You talked about there's a mood for change in Queensland politics. Does that mean Labor is going to be kicked out at the next election?
I don't think that's in any way inevitable. I do think that it'll be one of the factors at play during the next election. I'm being very honest about it. I think there always is in politics. After a while, people start to think, "Oh, I wonder what the other guys would be like." But then they have a long, hard look at the other guys, and the other guys have to be up to it. And so far, I'm not sure we've seen much of that.
You probably, given the state of the polls at the moment, you probably don't have to go too far to become the underdog.
That's right, Patrick.
Is anyone else? Where we're over in the gallery? Stephen Waddell from the Courier Mail.
Premier Stephen Waddell. You talk here about the politics of pessimism, but wasn't it you before the last election warning of an economic tsunami? And yet we didn't even go into recession here in Queensland. Why is it bad now for your opponents to talk a politics of pessimism and you to talk optimism when you used the politics of pessimism to win the last election?
Well, I don't believe that that's the case, Stephen. I think, in fact, one of the reasons why we didn't go into recession is because our government took some pretty hard decisions to make sure that we stayed out of it. What we saw in the middle of the last election, or in the lead up to it and during it, was the world still going down. And everybody knew that. And we needed to be clear as political parties about what we were going to do about that. So I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that the global financial crisis happened. I know that my opponents at the time were trying to deny it. What I said was people need to make a good choice about who they choose to steer us through this. And we did steer people through it. We kept our infrastructure going when other countries around the world started to put things on the back burner. And we made some really tough decisions to make sure we could keep that going. And that's one of the reasons. We kept the jobs. It's one of the reasons why the Queensland economy did not sink lower than it did.
Premier Mark Ludlow for the Financial Review. Just following, you're talking about being optimistic about the future. The numbers at the moment, especially for last financial year, weren't too flash. No economic growth, the lowest level since 1982-83. You're forecasting a big bounce back to 5% for this financial year. Given the state of global markets, especially our trade partners, United States now joining Queensland, being downgraded on AA+, do you think that, are you just as confident about achieving that 5% figure, or do you think they'll have to be revised down?
Mark, two things. Firstly, yes, we did see a very difficult year in the last financial year. But remember, in the middle of it, we had the largest natural disaster that Australia has ever seen. And I don't think there's any surprise that it was a big external shock to the economy. However, we are seeing very, very optimistic forecasts for this financial year. I'm not sure that anybody can just right now say exactly where the current state of the global economy is and what implications it might have for all of the forecasts nationally and for other states. And I'm certainly not going to stand here and say all of the forecasts are exactly as they were. We'll have to go and have a really good look at that, I think, in the mid-year review, and we'll make that public when we're in that position. Having said that, much of what is driving the optimism about those forecasts is big investment, private investment that is already locked and loaded, and I haven't seen any indication from any of those major projects that they're walking away from that. But as I said, I acknowledge that what's happened in the last week has got a lot more questions than answers at this stage, and they're the sort of things we'll have to take into account. Certainly at this stage, Treasury's not indicating any need to go and rush to revise forecasts, but who knows what will be happening in September, October in the global economy. I think there's sort of some very encouraging signs in the last 48 hours, but that's all they are at this stage.
Premier Jessica Van Vonderen from the ABC. You've announced a summit between regional mayors and mining companies. Just to be clear, is agriculture also invited to that summit? And how do you envisage that going, having those competing interests in the one room? Because as you mentioned, there are very strong feelings and concerns from agriculture about where the mining industry is going and encroaching on their livelihoods.
Thanks, Jessica. Let me be clear, what the summit is about is those mining projects that have already been approved and are currently under construction that have a demand for labour and for skills, and matching that up with those regional economies and through their mayors and the leadership of local councils, making sure that they know what the opportunities are, that there is a chance, for example, for places like Cairns and Hervey Bay, for unemployed people there to be getting these jobs and be doing that on a fly-in or fly-out and drive-in, drive-out basis. Many of these big projects are going to be staffed by people from around Queensland and around Australia. And some of the other Australians are going to move here for those chances, but some of them are going to be flying in, flying out from other parts of Australia. I think we will fail Queensland if in 2 to 3 years' time, in the peak of all of this, that the companies have managed to get their labour force, that they're going full steam ahead, and we still have higher than national or state average unemployment in places like the Gold Coast, Hervey Bay and Cairns. So it's not a summit about whether or not we should be approving particular projects. It's about those projects that have already been approved, that are already going ahead, that are in the circumstances right now that the only thing that will slow them down is if they can't get the labour that they need. The issue around agriculture versus mining is a bigger and different issue. It is one about where do we see the next round of mining development, how close or far should that be from agriculture, how do these two important and big industries coexist, and how can they be, in some cases, co-located. We have currently out for consultation legislation to protect what we're calling strategic cropping land. That is the best of the best in our agricultural sector. And those areas have been identified as the Golden Triangle, out west from Rockhampton and a little bit further south, and then out in the Surat Basin. And that will be the first time anywhere in Australia that legislation has protected agriculture in those high-value agricultural areas from mining projects. So I think we're making a lot of progress down that path. But it is true that some parts of our state in 20 and 30 years' time are not going to look the same as they do today. And that's no different than, 20 to 30 years ago. That's what I'm saying. 20 to 30 years ago, we saw some of these industries as exciting, big opportunities that we wanted to grab with both hands. That's what we did, and that's why we're sitting in the modern economy that we're currently enjoying. We're not going to be sitting in a modern economy that's keeping pace with the world in 30 years' time if we're not thinking the same way about these sorts of things and grabbing those hurdles and fixing them.
Premier Cathy Border from Channel 10, just following up Stephen's question about this deep-rooted public cynicism that you've alluded to today. Does that extend to you telling your own troops not to engage in negative politics, or is it just a reality that you both do it? For example, the last parliamentary sitting, your main roads minister saying Campbell Newman's plans for Ashgrove would amount to Enoggera turning into an LA-style maze of roads.
Look, I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. There's no way that you're going to see either side of politics stop doing a critique of each other, and nor would you want to. I think it's an important part of public life and public debate that we disagree on issues and we air those disagreements, and that's not going to stop. But I think it needs to be done in a way that does not entrench a public mood that believes we are no longer a country that can do great things. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're at some risk. We are better placed than just about any other country on earth at the moment, but I don't think that's how Australians feel. So I'm taking responsibility as a politician for my share in that. People in public life, whether they're commentators, politicians, whether they're in the media, I do think we need to actually be looking at both the good and the bad. Yes, there are some things to be worried about, and I'm not being Pollyanna-ish about it, but I have to say, if I looked at some growing global uncertainty again and thought, gee, where would you rather be facing all of that? I'd rather be in Brisbane than in London, and I'd rather be in Brisbane or anywhere else in Queensland than in most of the places in the United States at the moment. And that should give us confidence about where we go next.
Premier Melinda Howells from the ABC. You mentioned regional areas like Cairns and Hervey Bay and their higher unemployment rates, but recently Labor's own candidate for Hervey Bay criticised the government for only having vague notions about how to address the issue and just making soothing noises. Is that what you're still doing today?
I think what you've seen today is a very important part of understanding what's happening across the Queensland economy. We have an extraordinary opportunity, but a huge challenge ahead of us. The size and scale of what is happening in our resource sector, I think, is only beginning to be understood. And if we are going to realise that, we are going to need, frankly, every live, warm body to be part of it. And we need to make sure that Queensland, in all of its regions, gets an opportunity to be part of that. These are not easy things to work your way through. But we have a very good, strong track record on employment programs, on skills development, and we intend to take that track record, that experience, build on it, and make sure that every part of Queensland gets part of the action. And I think that we're up to it. I'm not talking about us as a government, I'm talking about Queensland. Queensland is up to it. It's not going to happen on its own. We need companies, we need local councils, we need everybody on the same page.
Premier Daniel Hurst from Brisbane Times. Campbell Newman has previously congratulated Peter Beattie for having a strong, sort of positive, productive working relationship with him when Campbell Newman was Lord Mayor, and he says that changed when you became Premier. How would you characterise the relationship you had with Campbell Newman when he was Mayor, and should it have been more? Should you have done more to sort of work productively with him?
Well, I think it's useful to take everything in those sort of commentaries with a little grain of salt, Daniel. I'm heartbroken that Campbell describes our working relationship in the way that he does. I can assure you we met on a very regular basis, tried to do it pretty much monthly, sometimes 5 weeks, depending on our diaries. I can point to a number of projects that wouldn't have happened without that good working relationship. As someone with a lot of experience working at both across local and federal politics from a state perspective, you can only get most things done if you understand how to work across the political divide. We've done that many, many times, and you might recall Campbell standing with me and launching the first ever River City project to see planning for the capital city done jointly by planners from state and local government with the Brisbane City Council. So I actually think we had a very good working relationship, and as I said, I am heartbroken that he doesn't share that view.
Premier, good afternoon. Natalie Behensky from Radio 4BC, which is one of the talkback radio stations that you were mentioning in your speech. And I'm just wondering, do you accept that people who call talkback are actually expressing legitimate concerns they have with the government and aspects of policies that have affected them? Do you accept that perhaps they feel left out of the boom that is that some parts of the Queensland economy are enjoying but not others, or do you just think they're whinging?
No, I think that we have to understand that everybody's reality is their reality, and I have absolutely no doubt that many people are deeply concerned about whether or not they and their family will get some benefits from what they see happening in Queensland, which is why I'm saying I think that we need to be talking more about what those benefits are, and we need to be making more effort to make sure that the benefits are spread. If you look in something like Gladstone, I think everybody thinks, to the extent that they think about the mining industry at all, particularly if you're in the city and you don't have much experience of that industry, I think people think, well, that's just big beefy blokes in overalls who are doing big mining blue-collar jobs. In the next 18 months in Gladstone, there will be between 6,000 and 8,000 new workers living in temporary work camps on Curtis Island. The total population of Gladstone is 35,000 people, the city of Gladstone. So if you get another 8,000 people in 18 months, so over the next 12 months, this time next year, just think about it. That's an awful lot of ripple effect across the economy. It's not just that these guys will be building LNG plants. They will be drinking beer. They will be sleeping on sheets. They will be going into town and spending money. This is something that I think we need to do more work to explain to people what it means for them and when they will start to see some effect from that. And not all of it will be felt in every single part exactly the same way. But no, I think the people who ring up Talkback Radio, I think from time to time there are people perhaps who are ringing from political parties to make political points. But by and large, I think the people who are expressing discontent, people who are unhappy, feel those things. They ring because they do feel unhappy. I'm saying our challenge is to work to make sure that they feel happier about living in a place that has so much promise, and they need to feel more part of what it might mean for them.
So does that mean I can tell Gary Hardgrave, the Drive announcer on 4BC, that you're willing to go on his program more often?
Well, it wouldn't take much for it to be more often.
Sorry.
Yours has got a question.
Roseanne Barrett from The Australian. With the politics of pessimism you've discussed, how much do you put down to the very unusual arrangement in the federal arena at the moment? And then further to Mark's question about the economy, was that an acknowledgement that in the mid-year financial review, things like the QIC investments will have taken a massive tumble and the whole budget will effectively have to be rewritten?
Well, I'll answer the second one first because I think the answer to that is clearly no. All I said was that I think it's too early to say what, if any, and there may be no effect of recent events on Queensland's forecasts, but I think it's far too early, literally a couple of, not long into the financial year and only a week, really 7-10 days into what we're seeing on the global market. So it's far too early to determine if that will have any effect on our forecasts. And I think you'd be in a better position, we'll be in a better position when we get to the mid-year review to see if that has any effect. So look, most recently we saw Deloitte's come out and say that they thought Treasury had undershot and that we were more likely to see an increase rather than a decrease. So I think anything you want to say about forecasts right now are just complete and utter speculation. What I'm saying is I think it'd be hard before the mid-year review, I think, to get anything sensible on what, if any, impact it's had. Secondly, look, I think the first question's an interesting one. None of us in our lifetime have experienced a federal government that is governing with a minority. It has happened in a number of states, but when it happened here in both the case of Rob Borbidge and Peter Beattie, they governed with one independent, not a group of independents who have quite a bit of difference between those independents and the Greens, so it's not like there's just one set of demands or influences that you have to be cognisant of. So I think there is no doubt that it is a novelty in Australian politics. There are nations around the world, Germany among others, that are good, strong economies with a strong and stable political environment that have had to govern with minor parties and they've become used to it. But I do think this is still a very novel thing in Australian politics, and I think there's no doubt that some of the concerns perhaps out there, or the lack, I think it's more that rather than making people pessimistic, I think they feel that everything's a little uncertain. They don't feel necessarily that there is absolute clarity about our political circumstances, and that doesn't help.
We've got time for one more, Premier.
Sorry, yeah. Premier. Apart from your existing MPs who have already declared their hands, have you asked your remaining MPs if they're definitely standing at the next election?
Thank you, Cathy. I spoke to my MPs at the beginning of this year and asked all of them to give consideration about whether or not they would be standing, and to make sure that they thought about it long and hard and made the right decision, and to give the Labor Party the opportunity to have pre-selections and to select good candidates. I'm not aware of any others who are intending not to stand. Clearly, though, as you know, as elections loom, sometimes people revisit that issue, but I'm not aware of anybody who is.
Premier, thank you for your time. A couple more quick ones. Have you told Anthony Chisholm that he's not allowed to have any negative ads during the campaign?
I don't think that you'd have a campaign of any... let's not be stupid about this.
You started it.
No. Well, I think it is really important to make the distinction. It would be ridiculous to have an election campaign where neither side don't any criticism of the other. It's important to actually point out what you see as your strengths and what you see as the weaknesses of your opponent. That's the basics of any debate. But I do think the way that we do it matters, and I do think that what we're seeing around the country at the moment, and many of you have talked to me about this in your own ways. I'm not making this up. People have said to me, and people in this room, people come back to Australia after they've been away for a while, and you can feel that right now we are not feeling the way that we have in the past, and there is something going on in the public debate that is particularly, I think, rancorous. And how do we rise above that to actually look at the big challenges, have an argument about them? Don't stop arguing. You know, the minute we stop arguing, I think we've given up as a nation. I think we should argue about things, and I think we should explore our differences and our disagreements, and never shy away from making a criticism that needs to be made. But if we're not careful about how we do it, then I think there's so much opportunity that we will miss, because people will start to feel that we can't do it. And I reckon we can.
And just to fulfil an earlier prophecy, when will the election be?
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope you put money on that tip. The tip was that I wouldn't answer the question.
There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the Premier.